I stood in my father's oak-paneled office, my whole body shaking. The walls seemed to close in on me as his voice grew louder. "If you won't work for me, you don't belong in this family," he shouted, his face turning red. My mother sat silently on the leather couch, her hands folded in her lap. She wouldn't meet my eyes. My brother Liam stood in the corner with a smirk on his face, enjoying every second of my pain. I couldn't believe what was happening. This was my father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who helped me with homework. Now he was throwing me out like I was nothing. "You're kicking me out because I want to build my own company?" I whispered, my voice breaking. I had just graduated from business school with honors. I had dreams. Real dreams about creating sustainable architecture, about building homes that help the planet. But my father didn't care about my dreams. He only cared about his construction empire. "You'll crawl back in a month," he said coldly, handing me an envelope. Inside was a severance check, like I was some employee he was firing. Not his daughter. An employee. My hands trembled as I grabbed my suitcase and dragged it toward the door. Behind me I heard Liam laugh. That laugh would stay with me for years. "My name is Janet, and I'm 26 years old. When I was growing up, I believed that family meant loyalty above everything else. My father had built his construction company from nothing, starting with just a truck and a dream. He had worked his way up, and by the time I was born, he was rich and powerful. He expected his children to serve the dynasty he created, to continue his legacy and make him proud. But I had different dreams. I spent my childhood sketching houses instead of playing with dolls. I watched how buildings were designed and imagined ways to make them better for the environment. In high school, I filled notebooks with ideas for eco-friendly homes, solar panels, rainwater collection systems, and green roofs. When I got to business school, I studied sustainable architecture and urban planning. My purpose wasn't to make money for my father. It was to build a better future. I never thought this dream would make me his enemy. I thought he would understand. I thought he would be proud that I wanted to make a difference in the world. But when I told him I was starting my own firm after graduation, his face had gone dark. "You're making a mistake," he had said. I should have listened to the warning in his voice. The first night I slept on my friend Emily's couch. The humiliation was suffocating. My phone kept buzzing with angry texts from family members. "You made your bed. Don't expect sympathy," my uncle wrote. "You're throwing away everything Dad built for you," another text said. I silenced my phone and buried my face in the pillow, crying quietly so Emily wouldn't hear me breaking down in the dark. That night, lying on her worn couch, I made myself a promise. I would never give them the satisfaction of seeing me beg. I would never crawl back to my father's office with my tail between my legs. If he thought I was useless, I would prove him wrong. Not for him, but for me. I had spent my whole life trying to earn his approval, and look where it got me. Homeless. Humiliated. Cast out. But something shifted inside me that night. The pain was still there, sharp and fresh, but it mixed with something else. Anger. Determination. Fire. By the time the sun came up the next morning, I knew what I had to do. I would build my own company. I would make it successful. And someday, my father would regret every word he said to me in that office. The next morning, Emily found me at her kitchen table with my laptop, sketching business ideas on napkins and drawing logos on the back of old envelopes. "What are you doing?" she asked, pouring coffee. "Building a future," I said. Emily smiled. She had always believed in me, even when my own family didn't. I created a business name, Green Frame Designs. It was perfect. It represented everything I wanted to build, structures that worked with nature instead of against it. I set up a basic website that same day using a free template. I took some photos of my sketches and uploaded them. Then I posted an ad on a freelance design website, offering architectural consulting services at rates I could barely justify charging. I didn't expect anyone to respond. I was just a 26-year-old with a business degree and 0 clients. But that afternoon a message came through. It was from a retired teacher named Mrs. Chan, who needed her home renovated sustainably. She had seen my post and liked my values. She wanted to meet. I stared at the message for 5 minutes, afraid to believe it was real. It wasn't much, I told Emily, showing her the message. But it was mine. A week later, my mother called and invited me to dinner at their house. She said my father wanted to talk things out. For a moment I let myself hope. Maybe he had cooled down. Maybe he missed me. Maybe this was his way of apologizing. I should have known better. Family dinners at my father's house were never about reconciliation. When I arrived, my father and Liam were sitting at the table with satisfied expressions. My mother looked uncomfortable. Before I could even sit down, my father started. "So, how's the little hobby going?" he asked, his voice dripping with mockery. Liam snickered beside him. "People like you end up designing garden sheds," my father continued, shaking his head. "This phase will pass. You'll come back to reality soon enough." I felt the old wound open up all over again. This wasn't a family dinner. This was an ambush. They wanted me to admit defeat, to say they were right, to beg for forgiveness. I looked at my mother, hoping she would say something in my defense. She just looked down at her plate. I picked up my bag and stood up. That was the night I stopped needing their approval, I whispered to myself as I walked out the door. 2 weeks later, I finished Mrs. Chen's home design. It was beautiful, solar panels integrated seamlessly into the roof, a rainwater collection system hidden in the garden, natural ventilation that reduced the need for air conditioning, and sustainable materials throughout. It was the first real project I had ever completed. Mrs. Chen loved it. She cried when she saw the designs. "You understand what I want," she told me. "You actually care about building something good." She filmed a testimonial on her phone, talking about how kind and talented I was. She posted it online with my contact information. For the first time since my father kicked me out, I felt something other than pain. I felt hope. The video went mildly viral locally. It got shared in community groups and sustainability networks. My phone started buzzing with inquiries. Small projects at first, a homeowner wanting solar panels, a small business needing an eco-friendly office space. But they kept coming. And each one was mine. I hadn't begged for these projects. I had earned them. One afternoon my phone rang. It was a real estate developer who had seen my work. He wanted to talk about a major project. My heart nearly exploded with excitement. This was it. This was my big break. The next project mysteriously fell apart. The contractors I had hired started backing out one by one, giving vague excuses. "We're overbooked," one said. "We've decided to focus on other areas," another explained. I was confused until I got a call from one of the contractors, speaking quietly. "Don't tell anyone I told you this, but your brother's company warned us about you. They said you were unreliable and wouldn't pay. That's why we're leaving." My blood ran cold. Liam was sabotaging my business. He was actually threatening contractors to make me fail. The betrayal burned deeper than my father's words ever could. This wasn't just rejection. This was war. I documented everything: the dates, the contractor names, the excuses they gave. I filed a formal complaint quietly, not knowing that this small action would later expose something much bigger. He wanted war? I told Emily that night, my hands shaking with anger. He'd get it. A month later I met Marcus. He was an older architect, maybe in his 50s, who had seen my portfolio online and reached out. He asked me to coffee to discuss my work. First I was cautious. I didn't trust anyone anymore. But Marcus was different. He wasn't condescending. He listened to my ideas and actually engaged with them thoughtfully. "You have real talent," he told me over coffee. "Not just artistic talent, but business sense. You understand people. That's rare." He offered to mentor me, to teach me the business side of architecture, how to pitch to clients, how to negotiate contracts, and how to manage investors. Marcus became the mentor my father never was. 3 months into our mentorship, Marcus invited me to an investor dinner. It was a big event with successful business people and venture capitalists. I almost didn't go. I was nervous. I felt like an imposter among these powerful, experienced people. But Marcus insisted. "You belong there," he said. Then he paused. "Fair warning though, your father is going to be there too." I saw my father the moment I walked into the ballroom. He was across the room talking to investors, looking like the king of his own small kingdom. My stomach twisted. A part of me wanted to run out immediately. But I stood tall and walked to the table where Marcus was waiting. Halfway through dinner my father noticed me. His jaw tightened. He watched me talk to investors about my sustainable architecture vision. When I got up to network, he followed me, making sure to insert himself into the conversation. My daughter is experimenting with design, he said loudly, his voice making it sound like a child's art project, not a legitimate business. I could have gotten angry. I could have yelled at him right there in front of everyone. But instead I stayed calm. I smiled politely and said, "You'll know my company name soon." I walked away without waiting for his response. Across the room, I saw Marcus nodding approvingly. Later that evening, an older woman approached me as I was standing near the bar. She slipped me her business card and whispered, "Call me. I want to invest in what you're building." The contract came through exactly 2 weeks later. A local government wanted to commission a sustainable housing community. It was a major project, 50 units, all eco-friendly, all designed with the community in mind. It was worth $500,000. My father's construction company had bid for the same contract. They didn't get it. I did. I'll never forget when the news was announced. The email landed in my inbox, and I had to read it 3 times before I believed it was real. My company, my tiny one-woman company, had beaten my father's massive construction empire for the biggest contract of my career. I heard later that Liam had a complete breakdown in his office when he found out. My father had screamed so loudly that everyone in the building heard him. He threw things. He fired people. His rage was explosive and terrible. But I didn't feel satisfied watching his anger. I just felt sad. Sad for what my family had become. Sad for the man my father was turning into. I had one day to enjoy the victory before everything got worse. The sabotage began immediately. Fake inspection reports. Complaints filed with false information. Anonymous 1-star reviews flooded my company's online page. Someone was trying to destroy my reputation before my big project even started. I traced one of the fake accounts and found it was registered under the name of Liam's personal assistant. It was obviously him. I screenshotted everything: the accounts, the fake complaints, the false information. I saved it all on my computer and emailed copies to myself 3 times over. This time I wasn't going to stay quiet about it. I stormed into my father's office without an appointment. The receptionist tried to stop me, but I walked right past her. My father was at his desk, and I could see the shock on his face when I burst through the door. CCTV cameras captured the whole thing. I knew that later everyone would see this moment. "You raised a competitor, not a clone." I spat, my voice cold and steady. "You're sabotaging my business because you can't handle losing to your own daughter." My father stood up, his face turning purple with rage. "You'll regret this rebellion," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "You'll regret every single word you're saying to me right now." I turned to leave, then paused at the door. I looked back at him and smiled. "We'll see," I said quietly. Then I left. Outside the building, my phone rang. It was a reporter. She wanted to talk about corruption in the construction industry. My heart started racing. I had the reporter sign a non-disclosure agreement before I met with her. I showed her documents, evidence of my father's company cutting corners on materials, of workers being paid below market rates, of buildings that didn't meet safety codes. I had collected this information from conversations with industry insiders, public records, and former employees who had reached out to me. The story broke on the local news 3 days later. Construction company cuts corners, endangers workers and residents. The headline read, "My father's company's reputation took a massive hit. Clients started canceling contracts. The city opened an investigation. My father suspected everyone, his staff, his business partners, his investors. He fired half his PR team in a panic, creating chaos from within his own company. But he never suspected me. He thought I was too busy with my own projects to be behind it." I felt a twinge of guilt as I watched his empire start to crumble, but then I remembered the look on his face when he threw me out. The guilt faded. Late one night, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Stay out of this or you'll regret it," the message said. My hands went cold. Someone was threatening me. Emily insisted I report it to the police immediately, but I refused. Instead, I saved the message and took screenshots. I used a phone tracking app to trace the sender. It was Liam. My own brother was threatening me. Not because I had done anything to him directly, but because his business was suffering as a result of his own bad behavior and my father's corruption. He was spiraling, drinking heavily, angry all the time, consumed with jealousy about my success. I added the threat to my file of evidence right beside everything else. Marcus sat me down for coffee and looked me in the eye. "Don't let them turn you bitter," he said seriously. "Janet, I'm watching you make amazing progress, but I'm also watching you focus more on revenge than on growth. That's dangerous." He was right. I was at a crossroads. I could expose everything about Liam's threat. I could push the investigation into my father's company harder. I could do things that would destroy them completely. Or I could focus on what I actually cared about, building my company and creating beautiful, sustainable spaces. I chose growth. I put the file of evidence away and focused on my work. The Sustainable Housing Community Project moved forward beautifully. My team and I poured our hearts into it. And then something amazing happened. My company won a National Eco-Design Award. Real recognition. Not based on my family's name or their money, but based on my actual work. For the first time, I felt truly proud. The interview was on a major morning show. The interviewer was friendly and interested in my story. How a young woman had built a successful sustainable architecture company from scratch. She asked thoughtful questions about design philosophy and environmental impact. Then she asked the question I had been dreading. "Your last name is Tate, and I know that's the same name as Tate Construction, the company that's been in the news lately. Are you related to the founder?" I took a breath. "Yes," I said calmly. "He's my father. But my values are my own." The interviewer smiled and nodded. That simple statement, "My values are my own," seemed to resonate with people. The clip went viral on social media. Suddenly everyone knew who I was. Not as the daughter of a corrupt businessman, but as a woman who had walked her own path. My phone started ringing off the hook with new clients and investor inquiries. The fallout was swift and severe. My father's clients started leaving. They wanted to work with me instead of him. Shareholders demanded answers about the corruption investigation. The company's stock price dropped. My father's board of directors started making decisions without him. Liam spiraled completely. I heard through the grapevine that he was drinking heavily, showing up to work hungover, making terrible decisions. He was angry all the time, furious that his little sister had somehow become more successful than he was. Their father's disappointment in him was crushing. One day my father apparently said something that Liam couldn't come back from. "If you'd been half the worker she is, we wouldn't be losing everything." Hearing those words made me sad more than anything else. 6 months later, the investigation into Tate Construction was completed. The violations were serious safety code violations, wage theft, environmental violations. The company faced massive fines and was forced to cancel most of its contracts. Clients pulled out. The empire my father had spent his whole life building was crumbling. I watched it happen from a distance, feeling a strange mix of emotions. There was satisfaction, yes, but mostly there was sadness. I thought about the young man my father had been, the one who built his company from nothing. And I thought about how greed and control had turned him into someone his own children didn't respect. Then one afternoon I got a call. My father had suffered a heart attack during a board meeting. He was in the hospital. I visited him 3 days later. He looked small in the hospital bed, fragile in a way I had never seen him before. His pride had cracked. When he saw me walk through the door, tears filled his eyes. "You were right," he said weakly. "I thought control was love. I thought if I controlled everything I could keep my family safe. But all I did was push you away." I sat down beside his bed. My anger had burned out long ago, replaced by something more complicated. "You can't build loyalty on fear," I said quietly. "That's something I learned the hard way." The doctor came in and told us that my father would recover physically, but his company wouldn't. It was too damaged, too broken. A week after my father got home from the hospital, his board of directors approached me. They wanted me to take over Tate Construction. They thought I could save the company and restore its reputation. I said no immediately, but then I thought about it. Thought about the workers who would lose their jobs if the company completely collapsed. Thought about the innocent people who would be hurt by my father's mistakes. I called Marcus for advice. "What would make you feel at peace?" he asked. I thought about it. The answer came quickly. I would offer my father a merger. Tate Construction would become a subsidiary of Green Frame Designs. We would keep the best parts of his company, the hard-working employees, the solid infrastructure. But we would rebuild it under new values: sustainability, ethics, responsibility. When I presented the offer to my father, he cried. Without hesitation, he signed the papers. The press conference was packed. Reporters crowded the room, cameras flashing. I stood at the podium and announced the merger of Tate Construction with Green Frame Designs. I talked about creating a better future, about building with both profit and purpose. I talked about second chances and redemption. My father stood to the side of the stage, watching silently. He looked humble, changed. The arrogant businessman was gone, replaced by someone who seemed to finally understand what he had done wrong. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. Headlines started appearing immediately. Young architect saves her father's company through merger, and Green Frame Designs becomes industry leader. For the first time, my father didn't mind sharing the spotlight with me. He seemed relieved to step back into the shadows. 3 months later, Liam's world finally collapsed completely. The fraudulent contracts, the sabotage, the harassment, it all came out. Not because I exposed it, but because his own desperation had left a trail of evidence. He was arrested on fraud charges and harassment charges related to his threats against me and others. I felt no satisfaction watching my brother face the consequences. I just felt tired. He had made his choices and now he had to live with them. He never learned, I said to Emily when we heard the news. At an industry event 6 months later, my father gave a speech. The whole room went silent as he walked to the podium. He was still recovering from his heart attack, moving slowly, looking much older than his years. My daughter became the leader I never was, he said, his voice shaking. I spent my whole life building an empire based on control and profit. But Janet showed me something different. She showed me how to build something that actually matters. He looked directly at me. Janet, I'm sorry. I'm deeply sorry for the pain I caused you. But I'm proud of the woman you've become. The audience erupted in applause. But what mattered most was that I wasn't angry anymore. My father had hurt me, but I had healed. I forgave him, not for him, but for my own peace. The next week, I received the Industry Award for Businesswoman of the Year. Standing on that stage, holding the award, I thought about the girl who had slept on her best friend's couch. I thought about the pain and the struggle and the endless nights when I wasn't sure I could keep going. I gave a speech that I had practiced 100 times in my head. Sometimes the people who break you only make space for who you were meant to be, I said. My father broke me. But in doing that, he gave me the freedom to build myself into the person I always wanted to become. Cameras panned across the audience and landed on my father. He was crying silently, watching his daughter receive recognition she had earned completely on her own. I walked off that stage feeling lighter than I had in years. 5 years later, I stood in front of Green Frame Designs' new headquarters building. My name was on the front in large letters. The company had grown exponentially. We had projects across 3 states. We had won dozens of awards. We employed 200 people, all of whom believed in our mission of sustainable, ethical building. My father visited sometimes, always quietly, always respectfully. He had become an advisor, working behind the scenes to help integrate Tate Construction's old operations into our new vision. He was humbled now, grateful, changed. I didn't need revenge, I said softly, looking at the building that bore my name. I needed respect, and I earned it. My father appeared beside me, and for once, he didn't try to take credit or insert himself into my moment. He just stood there, proud of his daughter in a way he had never been before. Not proud because of what she could do for him, but proud of who she had become. You were right, he said quietly. I once told you that you would crawl back. But you built a world where you didn't have to. I looked at him and smiled. No, I said. I didn't just build a world for myself. I built a world where people like me can build their own future without permission. And that was the real victory.